In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. One of the hardest things for me to let go of when I left the Catholic Church was the vastness of it. No matter where I went in the world, no matter how small the town, I could find a Catholic church. While I did not always understand the language, I was able to follow the liturgy and the rhythm of the service, and I found great comfort in that. However, it didn't take too long for me to realize that there were other denominations that have a similar liturgy and also have a worldwide communion. It might not be quite as easy to find an Episcopal or Anglican service as it is to find a Catholic one, but it is doable. Now, we talk about liturgy a lot in the Episcopal Church, but we rarely tell you what it is. To put it simply, liturgy is the way we worship. The whole service, everything we do, everything we say is liturgy. Liturgy is not just the work of the clergy, but it is also all of the people of the church. We have people up here in leaderships, up in the choir, and the ushers and the greeters. All of you are part of the liturgy. Liturgy, at its best, reflects what we believe and what we feel, and even what we aspire to be. Usually, when I talk to people about why they go to an Episcopal church, they speak about the familiarity. It was something that they grew up with, and the actions are familiar and comforting, like a warm blanket. Liturgy is essentially a pattern that we follow every Sunday. And while the words and the people change, the pattern remains the same. In a world that seems to change more and more rapidly, something that stays the same can be very comforting. Many Christians assume that we invented the concept of liturgy and that all our liturgies are completely original. But many of our liturgies come from the Jewish tradition. The Jewish people are really good at liturgy, and we have taken some of their liturgies and adapted them. Examples include parts of our Eucharist and baptism. However, there are a lot of liturgies and traditions from the Jewish people that we did not keep. One of them is the Festival of the Booths. This is a 7-day festival in the fall which commemorates the 40 years that the Jews spent wandering the desert. During that time, they didn't have permanent dwellings because they moved around. So when they settled in a place, it was for such a short time that they created a temporary shelter that they called a booth. So during the Festival of the Booths, observant Jews build these booths and eat their meals there for 7 days. This is a reminder of what their people went through and how God provided for them. The prophet Zechariah, who is a prophet in our Old Testament, wrote that the Lord would come to Jerusalem during the Feast of the Booths. The Gospel tells the story of Jesus, Peter, James, and John ascending a high mountain. While they were up on that mountain, Jesus was transfigured before them. Imagine the most magnificent light show or firework display that you had ever seen. That was the Transfiguration. Now, soon after this light show, both Moses and Elijah appeared out of nowhere, and the three of them chatted. Moses and Elijah were kind of superstars in that time. We know part of the reason that Elijah was such a superstar because we heard it in the first reading. He didn't die. He was taken into heaven in a chariot of fire. If you have to go, that is the way to do it. Most of us know what was special about Moses. He led the people out of slavery and eventually to the promised land. If both of these guys were showing up, this was a big moment. So what did the disciples do to commemorate this big moment? Well, Peter suggested that they build booths so that Jesus and the two heroes of the Hebrew Scriptures who had come back from the dead could have a nice place to sleep at night. Right after Peter made that offer, the text says, he did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Now, between that statement and the fact that no one responded to his kind offer, most people have determined that Peter was totally missing the point. Here were these amazing people all together, and Jesus transfigured before them, and he was trying to organize a camping trip. But what if Peter knew that text from Zechariah about the day of the Lord being during the Feast of the Booths? That was a Jewish holiday, and one that he might have celebrated. If so, he knew exactly what was happening. He knew that this was God, and this was the moment that God had made himself known. Peter needed to make it official by making booths. Peter was creating liturgy. This strikes me as both incredibly wise and a little dense. It would be like if Jesus returned today and sat down to dinner with us, and we told him that we'd rather do this in church, where we could get our chalice and our paten and the nice linens, because that's how we celebrate the Lord's Supper. And by the way, could he please use the Book of Common Prayer? Because those are the right words. In that situation, we would be limiting Jesus to the confines of our liturgical practice. And if we did that, we might miss something that he had to share. And that's what Peter seemed to be missing. He thought he knew what was supposed to happen. He knew what a good Jew did, and he did it. And he was partly right, because he understood the magnitude of the event. But instead of taking in the moment and experiencing the holiness, he tried to organize it. And he did that because he was terrified. When we are terrified, we go back to what we know, to what makes us comfortable. Recently, there have been a lot of people claiming to be spiritual, but not religious. And oftentimes, these people are not familiar with our liturgy. When they come in, they see people reading words, and no one appears to be saying what they really mean. Everything is ordered and structured, so there is no opportunity for the movement of the Spirit. And I know that even people who were raised in the Episcopal Church still feel that way. And I get a little defensive when I hear these things. As an ordained person, I represent this liturgy that so many people find dull and uninspiring. But I also get it because I've been at services that I find dull and uninspiring. I have occasionally found myself uninspiring. I was listening to a poet talk about spirituality versus religion. And he said, religion is everything that we do with those moments of intense spirituality in our lives. He is saying that we have these spiritual experiences, and these experiences demand action. And the action looks different for different people. In church, we have taken those spiritual experiences, thousands of years of spiritual experience, and turned them into liturgy, so that we will never be too far from that profoundly spiritual experience. We are not just saying words or doing our pew aerobics. We are reminding ourselves of every moment that we have felt a closeness, a longing for God. I understand why Peter wanted to memorialize that mountaintop experience. He wanted to capture it. But I wonder if he wasn't so worried about memorializing the moment, then maybe he would have heard pieces of that conversation between Moses, Elijah, and Jesus. Can you imagine what those three were talking about? Peter missed an opportunity. I love our liturgy, but sometimes I worry that we will let our need for order, beauty, and comfort get in the way of God's movement in our church. It pains me to admit it, but God's glory and holiness cannot be organized. I pray that within our liturgy, you find not only comfort, but also inspiration and strength to experience God's holiness in all aspects of your life. And then when you have those moments outside of these walls, you will hold them in your heart and you will experience them here again in church. So when you have that moment of forgiveness, when you feel the weight of your guilt lifted, that when you come and you say this confession that you say every Sunday, you remember what that moment felt like and you feel it again. That is how the confession means something. If you believe and feel what you're saying. So let's practice that right now. The word Alleluia is used when rejoicing and praising God. So I want you to think about a time when your heart was full of joy and love. It was so full that it was actually flowing out of you. Take a minute. And in that time, you wanted to say something that expressed that feeling so everyone would know how awesome you felt. And that word is Alleluia. When you say it with me, remember what it feels to be overwhelmed with love. Say it like you mean it. Say it like you won't be saying it for 40 more days. Do you think we can do it? I'm going to give it on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Alleluia! Very good.